Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. It's been a little bit since I've been here, but I've had a few things going on and so I just couldn't get to a new video. This week I'm going to discuss the works of Margaret St. Clair, another author that I think doesn't get any play on BookTube. She wrote science fictions in the 50s through the, I don't know, 70s or 80s maybe. Maybe not quite that long. But the first book I read of hers, I read on my Kindle, and it's called The Sign of the Labrys, and I really enjoyed it. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic story where the world has been wiped out by like this fungi, and only certain people are left, but there's still a disease that can kill you in two different ways that's goes through the population that's still there, and they live underground. And I mean, none of that's giving anything away. That's all pretty much stated right near the beginning of the book. But it follows a guy that um, basically goes on a dungeon delve. This book was actually one of the original inspirations for a dungeon delve in Dungeons and Dragons. Because he went kind of level by level, going down by levels in this underground habitat, and he encountered new obstacles on each level, and he was trying to get to the bottom level to get to the final thing he was looking for and the person he was looking for. And if you're into D&D at all, you'll notice that as a trope of the dungeon delve. So that was actually one of the inspirations for that. So that was kind of cool, and it was really cool how it played out in the book. It followed that dungeon delve through probably 2/3 of the book maybe, and then um, they started talking about witchcraft, but it was in a really science fiction-y kind of witchcraft. And they kind of dealt with that for a while and then went into another dungeon delve. And it just was a really entertaining story. I really enjoyed it. The Sign of the Labrys. Labrys. Like I said, I don't have it to show you. It was on my Kindle. But I really, really enjoyed that book. It it was a lot of fun. I just breezed right through it. But it was a lot of fun. Good book. Highly recommend it. Then the next one I read was The Green Queen, and this was actually her first novel. Now, the first half of this book they spend trying to get something accomplished, and then they accomplish it, and then they spend the last half of the book trying to undo it. So I wasn't quite sure how to take that, because there's really no explanation as for why all of a sudden what they were aiming for wasn't what they were aiming for anymore. But anyway, it starts out they want to find a woman to become this uh, mythical figure called the Green Queen, and it's a future society, and um, they keep narrowing it down until they finally find a suitable person to become this Green Queen. And then it turns out she actually has some powers, it appears. So there's almost a kind of science fiction witchcraft in this too. That was something that I think St. Clair used in a lot of her books, apparently, because it appeared in all three that I just read. So there's a little bit of kind of science fiction witchcraft in it. And then, and the main character in this is a guy that's sort of telling this story to somebody else that's relaying it after it's already happened. And you're never quite sure how to feel about him. He's, I mean, he's a reliable narrator. He seems to be telling the truth, but he starts out and you feel one way about him, then you kind of feel another way about him as it goes on later, then you kind of dislike him, then he kind of gets back in your good graces again. So I mean, it's a really interesting way of having a narrator for the book. And it was really entertaining. Like I said, I had some issues with just the overall through arc of the story because I wasn't quite sure why they changed direction all of a sudden. But it was an enjoyable read. It's not a long book like a lot of these are. It's part of an ace double with 3,000 years. I haven't read it yet. It's not Margaret St. Clair though. But it was just, it was entertaining. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as Sign of the Labyrinth, but I did enjoy it. And, I'm glad that I read it. Now, the last book of hers I read was called Message from the Eocene. I have no idea why it's called that. I just finished it, but I really honestly don't know why it's called that because it never comes up in the book. It's only 114 pages. It's a pretty short novel. This was also one of her earlier novels, and it is actually a science fiction ghost story, which is really interesting because you get this character that's an alien who's on Earth billions of years ago, and you don't know why they're there or what's going on, but you get the first several chapters are dealing with them being there and finding this artifact, this book that is supposed to open the secrets of the universe to them. And the character is called Tharg, and he has to try to find a way to hide the book because he's being chased by other aliens that don't want him to have the book. And so he ends up becoming, in a science fiction kind of way, a ghost. And he's essentially haunting the rest of the book. And the book skips through time, and he tries to find ways to communicate with the living because it finally goes up into times with humans, and through various times, like it starts in the 1800s and goes through the future of now, and he tries to find ways to communicate with humans because he needs to get this book, and he wants them to find it because of the secrets that it holds, and it might hold the secret to getting him back to a body again. And so it's really interesting how he interacts with the humans in the story in the 1800s. Of course, they say it's a ghost on a third floor of this mansion, that nobody uses the third floor, but they hear sounds from it, and it's him trying to contact them in a way, but he ends up scaring them. And because of course, it's 1800s and it's a ghost, so people were a lot more likely to believe that kind of stuff at that period. Then there's another section later where he's on an island where these French people are running a mine, and he does something really strange with the mine to get the people to help him, which they don't have any clue what it is that this. I'm not going to say what it is. I mean, it's no big deal, but um, this thing that happens in the mine, they don't understand why it's there, and they don't understand how to get rid of it. Then they deal with the mine, the guy that's in charge of the mine. His wife has like extrasensory perception, and she's kind of a witch, which again is how that shows up in this story. And the people of the island are superstitious, and so they don't trust her. And Tharg is trying to communicate with them too, and ends up being a little bit more successful. But I won't say what happens with it, but um, they go on the search for this book for him, and it's really interesting what happens with it. And then it goes on into the future again, into the future of our world, and there is a multinational space exploration going to Venus, and Tharg once again tries to figure out how to communicate with these people, and that's where the book ends. And you do get sort of a conclusion, but I would have liked to have had a little more at the end. Like I said, it was a short novel, but it really could have used, I thought, at least a few more pages just to kind of bring you down instead of just stopping. Because of the way it goes, it just kind of stops. And I mean, there is a conclusion to it, and you get why she ends it that way, why St. Clair ends it that way. But um, I felt it could have used a few more pages at least to kind of tie things up, because you're curious about what happens with certain things at the end. But again, it's kind of a science fiction ghost story that spans billions of years, and it's a really interesting story. I didn't like it as well as Labrys or the Green Queen, but I did enjoy reading it, and I would recommend it. Just you're never quite sure what to expect while you're reading it because of the way it kind of jumps around in time. But it was a good book. Like I said, it had a few issues that could have been worked out, but again, it had her um, her dealing with the kind of science fiction version of witchcraft. The Green Queen also dealt with uh, kinds of fungi too, and that was something that appeared in some of her books, like the Sign of Labrys, and how it ended up causing mass destruction and death, and it dealt with that. It dealt with some fungi type things in here too. So that was another message that she kind of you got, that she had some kind of issue with that apparently. Now I've got some more on the message of the Eocene. Also has Three Worlds of Futurity. It's an ace double, and it's also by Margaret St. Clair, which I didn't even realize when I ordered the book. I just ordered it for the Eocene book, and then I realized once I got to looking, I was like, oh, the other one's her too. But uh, it has 5 stories in it. I don't know why it's called Three Worlds of Futurity if it has 5 stories, but well, maybe we'll find out when I read it, because I will be reading more of her. I enjoyed her writing very much. Then also, I got a book of her short stories called The Hole in the Moon. I'm looking forward to reading it. It, yeah, she lived from 1911 to 1995. Um, there's a little bit of information about her on the back there, but very interesting writer. I'm really eager to read her short stories because like I said, I enjoyed the way she wrote her novels, but you always get a different flavor when you read short stories by an author. Then I've got three books that are by St. Clair that have they're they're not really a trilogy per se, but they deal in the same world. So they're kind of tied together. The first one's The Dolphins of Altair. I'm not sure what these are about. I've just kind of read briefly about them, but they came recommended by the people that I was reading about them with. The second book is The Shadow People. And as you can see, all these you got to get secondhand because they're not on Kindle. The Sign of Labris is, as far as I could tell, the only book of hers that was on Kindle. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was the first one I read, but all these others you got to find secondhand. And some of them are a little bit expensive, but others are not. But Shadow People's the second book in that series. It looks like it's got a little sword and sorcery almost to it, if you judge anything by the cover. And then the last is The Dancers of Noyo, and that's the third and final book, and I think it was her last book. I think these three books were her last books. When was this one done? It was 1973, so I think this was her last book. So I've got a good spread of books from her, and I'm definitely going to read these other ones by her. I really enjoyed them. So Margaret St. Clair, great author. Like I said, some of her earlier books I had a few issues with, but nothing that was major. But the Sign of Labris, which was later one of her later books, I really, really enjoyed that one, and I highly recommend it. If you're going to read just one to check her out, read the Sign of the Labris. And I'm looking forward to reading those other ones, especially her short stories, because I'm eager to see what she does with those. But anyway, that's Margaret St. Clair. I thought she deserved a little run on YouTube, and that's pretty much all I have to say about that. And I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed bringing it to you, and I will see you when I see you.